if there's an altcoin season during this cycle, there's three different hypothetical price scenarios that I do have on my mind when it comes to DAIA. Even though nothing I say is financial advice, what is the first one? The first one is maybe the idea of $10, which actually is around an 18x from here, and the market cap at that point would be, slightly above $1 billion at that point, nearly $1.2 billion. But even besides that, when I take a look at DAIA, why wouldn't this necessarily surprise me? It's because I do like its fundamentals. Let me explain why. For instance, if we take a look at DAIA, it is a trustless Oracle network. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, who cares about that? Well, I find it pretty interesting because I think the keyword there is Oracle. Again, a trustless Oracle network, but I want to discuss the Oracle aspect. Now, what is an Oracle, right? In this case, it's basically a data feed that brings data from off the chain, so it's off-chain data, and it brings that data over into the blockchain. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, what's the benefit of something like this? A lot of decentralized applications out there, they actually can't function properly without off-chain data. So this right here, the way to take a look at it is that it's basically, in a sense, sort of helping, in some cases, decentralized applications function properly. Now, that's just generally speaking, right? And if I take a look at something like Chainlink, right? Chainlink, it's very well known for its decentralized Oracle network. We also take a look at something like Pyth. Pyth is another very famous player. It's kind of like the number two. Sometimes people consider the Chainlink. But that's just some pretty famous examples out there when it comes to a project that has this type of, sort of vibe when it comes to oracles. DAIA, the market cap is considerably lower than something like Pyth, even Chainlink's native token called Link, right? I mean, DAIA currently market cap is, around 65 million. But still, we've kind of seen that blueprint work out pretty well when it comes to Chainlink and as well as Pyth, right? To a certain extent. So I'm not necessarily saying that DAIA is going to be something that massive one day, but at the same time, I like its focus. This is the way to take a look at it. However, I also take a look at its other aspects when it comes to, again, DAIA. We take a look at, for instance, token price feeds, which supposedly supports, thousands of tokens, so I find that pretty impressive. There's also something called verifiable randomness. Now, this, again, verifiable randomness, which is used for random number generation. Now, this right here is actually could be used for in some cases like, gaming, right? Where there is a need for, let's say, random number generation. But even besides that, when it comes to Chainlink, it does have something called verifiable random function, which actually, again, is kind of similar to this. So I think this is kind of the similarities that something like DAIA has, I think, with something like Chainlink. Again, that Oracle aspect, also that kind of random number generation aspect as well. So again, I like the whole vibe here. But besides that as well, DAIA also has aspects like, for instance, real-world assets, or should I say RWAs, and more specifically, RWA price feeds, right? Now, if we take a look at, for instance, RWA price feeds, why do I think it's pretty cool? It's because if we take a look at RWA, again, it stands for real-world asset, but then if we take a look at RWA tokens, for instance, they are digital representations of physical assets on the blockchain. And what could these be used for in terms of the sectors? It's like, for instance, real estate, and also even if we take a look at art, even, right? We also take a look at stocks and bonds. So I find that pretty interesting. And more specifically, again, when it comes to, DAIA and its RWA price feeds, for instance, we can see real-time price feeds for traditional assets like stocks and commodities. And supposedly it does support, again, thousands of assets, so it's pretty cool. However, also on top of that, we take a look at how DAIA has aspects of something called fair value price feeds. So in the grand scheme of things, I do like DAIA overall. Again, it's kind of like a miniature version, the way you take a look at it, of Chainlink and also something like Pyth. But yeah, it's kind of like that. But to me, if I do believe in this space, if I do believe in kind of, projects that are focused on oracles, DAIA is something I want to focus on because even despite, there's a lot of big players within this space, right? I feel like there's not that many popular projects that are kind of focused on oracles. Yeah, sure, to a certain extent, I take a look at Flare, right? Flare is another pretty okay, famous project. That also has something called the Flare time series oracle. But then again, when I think about projects that have an aspect of an oracle, I don't think about 20 or 30. And DAIA, again, despite having a market cap of below 70 million currently, it is still something I would consider pretty prominent, right? Within the space that it's in. Again, this kind of oracle focused type of projects. I find that pretty interesting. And I think that if anything kind of showcases the lack of famous, competition when it comes to this market sector. If this had been in a different market sector, let's say, right? Let's say in the case of AI or something like that, maybe this type of project that's like this massive, it would be kind of a little bit forgotten about in the mainstream. But typically, again, when I think about oracles, just because I don't think there's that many famous players within that space right now, Daya is still one of the ones I think about. So then, again, this is what I like about it. It doesn't really have that much, like, I would say, popular competitors. It has massive competitors, like, again, Chainlink, Pyth, and even Flare to a certain extent. But it doesn't have, like, the volume of that. It doesn't have, like, 20 or 30, I think, to really kind of compete with that are that popular. But yeah, that's the way to take a look at it. So maybe if, let's say, there is an altcoin season, hypothetically Daya at the price of $10, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me, but besides that point, the second price scenario I do want to discuss is maybe the idea of $11, which actually is a 20x from here, and the market cap at that point would be around 1.3 billion considering current circulating supply. Now, the reason why this wouldn't necessarily surprise me is because it just doesn't seem like such an outlandish market cap to me, let alone something like Chainlink, which is like the most famous player within, this specific market sector that Dai is focused on. Again, like, that Oracle type of sector, right? Link, which is Chainlink's native token, market cap is already in the many of billions. It's already very massive. Even if we take a look at Flare, its native token called FLR, market cap is well over $1 billion as well. So when I take a look at Daya, it's kind of like as if for me, going back a little bit in a time machine, I'm not telling them to do anything, but then it's kind of like going into Flare or something like Pyth or something like Link, but just with a way lower market cap. It's kind of like that, like sort of going back in time and then believing those type of projects before they really popped off. It doesn't mean Daya is ever going to be that massive, by the way, but then it's just kind of giving me sort of a vibe of like a miniature version of that, which is why I mentioned that. But then again, this market cap right here just doesn't seem that ridiculous to me. I mean, keep in mind, Chainlink, Pyth, Flare, they're this massive right now. And this is not even, I think, during an altcoin season, because I don't think I've seen one during this cycle. And they're already this massive. So, a market cap of around 1.3 billion, it's not something that would necessarily surprise me when it comes to Daya, but only time will tell. Now, the third and final hypothetical price scenario that I do want to explore is maybe the idea of $12. Now, that would be nearly a 22x from here, and the market cap at that point would be nearly 1.5 billion. Again, considering current circulating supply. Now, when I take a look at, during the cycle, why do I like it a lot better than actually back in 2021, even despite me not seeing an altcoin season yet during the cycle? Well, it's because there is supposedly over 600 million crypto owners currently, which is supposedly more than ever before in history, whereas in the peak of the 2021 bull run, there was like around 300 million crypto owners at that time, and that was during the peak. And again, granted, there's more competition right now, I think, when compared to back then, but then again, there's just way more crypto owners, right? Not to mention, I take a look at the Bitcoin ETF, the Ethereum ETF. I just like the whole vibe overall, and if this, hypothetical altcoin season, if it ever even wants to happen during the cycle, if it looked better than back in 2021, it wouldn't surprise me, and maybe Daya at the idea of $12 wouldn't necessarily surprise me either. But besides that point, what is the timeline? Now, I will not be able to know the exact moment in time, because even if I put up a price chart, I drew random triangle, or I drew falling wedge pattern, the market's not going to care about that, you know what I mean? But even besides that, at least I can take a look back in history, and maybe just take a look at some clues from there. However, it doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same, right? I mean, it's just based off history, but I'm going to discuss it nonetheless. But again, typically altcoins, as a worst case scenario, they usually peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. So if we can actually consider the last Bitcoin halving event back in April of 2024, again, 18 months from then would actually mean October this year. And keep in mind, we're in October right now. It doesn't mean it's going to happen this month though, because who knows? But then, even if it happens later, like maybe November, December, or even January or February or even March of next year, whatever the case may be, I'm going to still be holding, staying patient, and that's about it. Again, I'm not telling you to do anything, but personally, I'm dollar cost averaging and just staying patient, because I am in this mindset where the only thing I can control is myself. Like, I cannot demand the market to do this or do that. I have literally no control over that. I have no control over, just anything when it comes to the market. So then personally, I'm controlling myself, just dollar cost averaging, waiting, and staying patient and just preparing for a moment in time, as opposed to trying to find the perfect moment. So if I'm just like staying patient and just being there, if let's say there is a moment in which things do better, hypothetically, I want to go along with the ride. But that's just my mentality. I'm not trying to find the perfect moment again. I'm just dollar cost averaging, waiting, and staying patient. And that's literally about it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you for watching. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.